Gittin Daf Ayin Aleph contains one Mishnah near the end of the Daf. We begin with a halacha said by Rav Kana in the name of Rav that the Gemara tries to refute from our Mishnah. So Rav Kana says in the name of Rav that a cheresh is referring to someone who can neither hear nor speak, a deaf mute. If he can write, then he's allowed to instruct a shliach to write a get for his wife by writing the instructions. So the Gemara asked, this should be pashut from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said that if a person can't speak, but he could nod his head when we ask him if we should write a get, so we can do that. So he can communicate his intent to divorce his wife by nodding. So if he can communicate by nodding, certainly he can communicate by writing. That's a much clearer communication. Somewhere says that doesn't prove anything. The person who can communicate by nodding is an elaim, someone who can't speak, but he could hear. There's no question about the das that he has. Rav here is talking about a cheresh who can neither hear nor speak, who you assume is like a shaita and doesn't know what's going on, and he does not have das. So much of a chiddush to say that if he communicates through writing or any other acceptable means, that he could make a shliach to divorce his wife. Now, the Gemara proves that there's very big difference between an elim and a cheresh. That a cheresh is considered to not have das, but an elim has das. But here, the Gemara brings a brisa where it uses the word cheresh differently. It uses the word cheresh to refer to someone who can speak but can't hear. That type of cheresh, as well as an elim who can hear but cannot speak, the brisa says clearly they do have das. So it's not to be confused with a cheresh who can't hear or speak that does not have das. But the brisa clearly says that an elim does have das here. Now, what is the reason that how do we know first that an elim is one who can hear but not speak, and a cheresh is one who can speak but not hear? That's from a pasuk. It says, "V'ani cheresh le'eshma." I am a cheresh, I don't hear. Okay, elim le'efechpiv, and like a mute who does not open his mouth. So there you see the definition of those two terms. Another way of establishing that elim means someone who can't speak is that it's a contraction of the terms ishtaka milule. His words were taken away from him. Okay, now the Gemara has another kasha on Rav's halacha that you can communicate through writing. So the Gemara says, I'm going to clearly show you that communication through writing does not count as speech. The halacha is if somebody could say edus and he refuses, we make him swear that he doesn't know edus. And if he swears falsely, asking a korban chatas, that for the sin of swearing that he doesn't know edus and he really knew. Now, this is not true about an elaim who cannot say edus. Since he couldn't say edus anyway, he doesn't have to make a korban chatas even if he swears that he doesn't know anything and he really knows. So the Gemara asks, according to Rav, he could say edus through speaking, through writing, that is. So then why don't you say that he should have to make a korban chatas also? He could have written his edus. And you're telling me that Rav said that speaking is good communication, that writing is as good communication as speaking. So my answer is no. Writing is as good communication as speaking as far as making a shliach, which is not a testimony. However, for a testimony, there's a very big difference between writing and speaking, that the Torah says, mipihem, and we have a drasha lo mipik savam. You can only hear testimony through the spoken word and not through the written word, and therefore he cannot communicate functional, acceptable testimony. The Gemara now asks three kashas, all from the same brisa, about this idea that an elim can never say testimony. So Gemara says we have a brisa that says that just like we test an elim's intelligence by asking questions in order to divorce his wife for him, we also test him for masos umatanes, that is transactions, gifts, eduyos, testimony, and yerushos, inheritance. So the Gemara is going to ask from these four things three kashas. First of all, the most obvious is it says eduyos. It says we test him by asking him questions to establish his testimony. So you see, he can testify. The Gemara answers there is only one type of testimony that he could do, and that's testimony about the death of a woman's husband to allow her to remarry, which the Rabbanon accepted a lot of lenient forms of testimony which we did not otherwise accept in order to allow an aguna to get remarried. Now the Gemara asks about Yerushos. What does it mean that he's testifying to inheritance? Obviously, it means that what does it mean that we test his intelligence, that is, for inheritance? Obviously, that means that he wants to testify about inheritance. So the Gemara says that's not what it means. It means that he wants to change the division of his own property. We test him to make sure that he knows what's going on. And the third thing the Gemara asks is about Masu Matan, that the Gemara also says should be assuming that's referring to testimony about transactions and gifts. The Gemara says no, it's not. It's talking about he wants to make a deal or give a gift himself. We want to make sure that he knows what's going on, so we test him. The Gemara now goes back to asking Kashas and Rav, who said that a cheresh can divorce his wife by writing instructions to create a shliach. So the Gemara says we have a brisa. This is clearly not that way. It says that we accept the hinting, the motions, or the mouthing of a cheresh for communication only as with regards to selling or to metaltalin, but not for gittin. So the rest says clearly you cannot take the instructions of a cheresh for a get. So how could Rav say that? So the Gemara says it's a machlekes tanaim. Rav is going like a different Tana. We have the Tana which quotes this, and it's followed up by Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that there is a type of cheresh who can create a get through hinting, through motioning, or through communicating in other ways, and that is somebody who was originally able to hear and speak and then became a cheresh. If somebody was a cheresh from birth, so then you're right, then he can't communicate to create a get. However, if he was born healthy and then became a cheresh, then he can. And therefore, Rav is talking about that case, and Rav is going with the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, saying he can communicate by writing. So now the Gemara asks on Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, is it true that somebody who was a cheresh from birth can never divorce his wife? It can't be, because we have a brisa that says that a cheresh can marry a woman and he can divorce her. And this is talking about a cheresh from birth, because if he was not a cheresh from birth, then if he marries her when he's healthy and then he becomes a cheresh, he cannot divorce her. That is, the marriage of a healthy person is a dairaisa. That cannot be divorced by a cheresh, which is only divorced derabanan. It's only if he got married as a cheresh, where there was only a marriage derabanan, that could be dissolved by a get derabanan. So here, why would Rav Shimon ben Gamliel say that a cheresh from birth cannot divorce his wife? It's not true. He can. We see so clearly in this case over here. So the Gemara answers, no, there's a difference. That case is talking about where he married as a cheresh, so the marriage was only derabanan. However, this is a situation in which a cheresh from birth has a marriage daraisa. What's that? She falls in from yibum. Now, what type of yibum? Gemara says yibum of a healthy brother, and therefore the marriage to the brother was a daraisa, and then he died, so she's now falling to yibum daraisa. And when he does yibum, that is a marriage daraisa, and therefore cannot be dissolved ever through the get of a cheresh. Now, the Gemara says another way we could say that we're actually talking about with even the brother who died was also cheresh. That was a marriage darbanan, but we do make a gzeira on that marriage darbanan because the cases of yibum look very similar. We're afraid if we allowed a cheresh yibum, that is the yibum of a cheresh, where the brother who died as well as the brother who survived, they're both chereshim, if we allow them to get divorced with a get, we'll also do that if the original brother was a pekach, he was healthy, and that of course is forbidden, so we don't allow that either as a gzeira. The Gemara explains we don't make a gzeira from a yavam to a regular wife. Those are not similar, not confusable. But two yavamas, where one comes from a healthy brother, one comes from a cheresh, those are very mix-upable, and therefore we would make a gzeira. Now, the Gemara asks, we have a brisa that says that we don't make such a gzeira. We don't make a gzeira from a healthy brother to a cheresh brother. The Gemara quotes a brisa that says if you have two brothers married to two women, and either the two brothers were both chereshim, and one, two, or none of the women were chereshes, or both women were chereshes, and one, two, or none of the brothers were chereshim. In either of those situations, the halacha is as follows: if the women are sisters, so that the one who's falling to yibum is an achos ishto, and therefore she's an erva, they're pater from yibum. However, if she's not a sister, they're just two strangers, the two women, then they should do yibum. So you see, even in a case where you had the brother being healthy or a cheresh, you do still require yibum. So you see, we didn't make gzeira. So the Gemara says, you're right, we're going to retract that. The second answer doesn't work. We'll have to go with our original answer. We're talking about where the first brother was a healthy one at the time of his marriage. The one now goes back to the statement of Rav Shimon Gamliel. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said that there's a difference between a cheresh from birth and a person who was born healthy. The one wants to know, the Rabbanon, do they agree with that or they disagree with that? The Rabbanon had said that a cheresh cannot divorce through writing. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said that's true if he was cheresh from birth, but not if he became a cheresh later in life. The Rabbanon could be agreeing to that. Shimon ben Gamliel could be saying a caveat in their Rabbanan, or their Rabbanan could disagree. Their Rabbanan could say, no, even if he became a cheresh later in life, he still cannot divorce through writing. So what does the Rabbanan hold? So the Gemara quotes Yochanan, who says the Rabbanan disagree with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. They hold even a cheresh later in life can never divorce his wife, because he's considered to not have das at all. Now the Gemara wants to bring a proof to Rabbi Yochanan from a Mishnah, and the Gemara is going to reject it with three other interpretations of the Mishnah. This Mishnah is brought by Abai. The Mishnah says that if a woman became a shaita, her husband can't divorce her. If a husband became a shaita, he can't divorce his wife forever. Cannot divorce her, lo yotzi olamis. So why is it different? Why do we say if the wife became a shaita, he can't divorce her, and if the man became a shaita, he can't divorce her, olamis? What's the olamis mean? So what I want to say is that the olamis probably means is that even if he could communicate through writing, it says if he became a cheresh or a shaita, the Brisa says. So even if he could communicate through writing, that's not enough. It still doesn't improve. So this would be the Tanakama, and it's showing that the Tanakama holds that it doesn't make a difference. Here he became a cheresh, says he became a cheresh, and still he can't divorce at all. So the Gemara says that would be good proof, but it's not necessarily the pshat in this Mishnah. The Mishnah and when it says Elamis could mean three other things. First of all, the Mishnah could mean that even if we could tell that he still has das at some point, we have other ways of determining that he has das, he still can't divorce her. Or a second shot, we're going to have two. The second shot is that it's to show that for the man it's midoraisa, for the woman it's derbanan. Midoraisa, a woman who's a cheresh could be divorced because she doesn't have to have das. She could receive the get bal karcha against her will. It's the Chachamim that said you can't divorce a woman who's a shaita because she can't protect herself, she can't take care of herself. And therefore it says just la yotzi because it's not a deraisa. However, the man, he can't order, he doesn't have das, he cannot make the decision to make a divorce. There it says la yotzi elamis because that's a deraisa halacha. Now we get to our next Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses the halacha if somebody makes a shliach, can they make other shlichim to do the job? We've seen this topic discussed earlier, and the Gemara is going to try to see how this Mishnah fits into that subject. So Mishnah says the following thing: if someone or some people doesn't specify, it does use amru, which is plural. If they say to someone, "Should we write a get for your wife?" and he says to them, "Ksuvu," he says, "Right." And then they didn't do it themselves, but they went and told the sefer to write and two of the Edom to sign. Even though the husband then went and used it, it's possible because it was not written by his shlichim. It was written by people that his shlichim created, and therefore it's possible. So the Gemara wants to know, does this fit in the opinion of Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Yossi? We saw Machlekes Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi earlier about mili mimsar l'shliach. Can a shliach give over a job to other shlichim? And that's talking about where you had a group of three, that's a beis din, can authorize others. So Gemara says here, the Mishnah clearly says, this halacha where the husband said to them ksuvu, where he said to them write, where is a specific indication that he wants them to write it and not someone else. That implies, had he not said that, had he just said give the get tenu get leishti, then he would not have specified that they write. It would be fine that they gave over the job to someone else. Gemara says therefore that's Rabbi Meir who holds that you can give over a shlichus to someone else. Here the Mishnah is only because he specifically said that's not an option because he said ksuvu. Says the Gemara though, if you look later in the Mishnah says that the only way that you could have the sefer and the edim be kosher is if the husband himself said to the sefer write and to the edim sign. So hold on a second. That seems to indicate that if he had said tenu, it would not be allowed. If he had said to one shliach, you guys give it, they could not pass it on to someone else. That's Rabbi Yossi who says midila misum l'shliach. Meaning we have three cases here. We have the case where the husband said ksuvu, and then we have the case where the husband said tenu, and then we have the case where he said to that specific sefer and that specific edim, you guys write it. If he said ksuvu, so then we said everybody would agree that you can't give it over to anybody else. If he said tenu, that should be the case of our machlokes, as long as you have three people there. If he said to the sefer and to the edim, you guys do it, then that should be kosher according to everyone else for them to give it over to that sefer and that Edom. So the problem is, why does the Mishnah say that the only case in which the Sefer and the Edom are allowed to do it is if the husband says it? It's not true. According to what we're saying now, even if he said the middle case of Tanu, that should be enough. So the Gemara tries a few explanations as to how this makes sense. The Gemara first says the first case, the first half of the Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, and the second half is Rabbi Yossi. The first half is saying that Tanu is good, and the second half is implying that Tanu would not be good enough. He would have to actually go over to the Sefer and the Edom that they appointed and say it himself. And the Gemara tries another explanation. The Gemara says, no, the Sefer is talking about where he never said Tanu. He made the original Shlichim to do it. They went and appointed someone else, and he didn't say anything at all. So the Gemara asks, if that's true, then the Mishnah shouldn't say until he goes and says to the Sefer, write, and to the Edom, sign. It doesn't have to say it. It just has to say Tanu. So that can't be the answer. So the Gemara tries a different shot. The Gemara says, okay, maybe we're talking about where there weren't 3 people. If there are no 3 people, everybody agrees that you can't give the job over. You can only give the job over if there are at least 3, because that's called a beis din. So the Gemara says again, and then the Mishnah shouldn't say at the end that it's kosher only if he goes over and tells the Sefer and the Edom themselves. It's not true. It could be kosher as long as you get the 3rd person, as long as you get 3 people there. So therefore, the Gemara tries another pshat. This pshat says it's not all Rabbi Meir, instead it's all Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi was mili lo mimsem l'shliach. You cannot give over to other people to do the job. Shlichim cannot transfer instructions, and it's all Rabbi Yossi. The kasha is why in the beginning does the Mishnah quote the case where he said ksuvu, which implies that had he said tenu, it would be okay. Gemara says no, it doesn't imply that had he said tenu, it would be okay. It implies that had he said imru, had he specifically said give over to someone else these instructions, that would be okay. Ksuvu is as opposed to imru, but tenu would be fine also. So the Gemara says, so then why does the Mishnah later continue and say that it's not good until he says to the Sefer to write and to the Edom to sign? That's not true. You don't need to go that far. You just need to go until he says imru. It should say that until he says imru, that would be okay. Next kasha is that Rabbi Yossi does not agree that imru is okay. So it can't be to exclude imru, as we saw earlier in the Gemara. We've proven that Rabbi Yossi holds that even by imru you cannot give over shlichus to someone else. Where is that? So that the Gemara repeats the proof we had earlier. We have a brisa that says that a sefer that signs and an aid, a sefer that signs along with one aid is kosher. The Gemara, the Mishnah had said that he writes it. The Gemara explained that it means that he signs it. And the Gemara's kasha was, how is it possible that a sefer signs is okay? You have a problem that maybe the husband didn't give the instructions to the sefer. He told 2 witnesses to sign, the sefer write, and 2 witnesses sign, and they're going to feel bad, and they're going to allow the sefer to sign, which is no good because he wasn't appointed. And the only way that makes sense is if the sefer knows that he can never sign unless the husband tells him to, because he holds like Rabbi Yossi that you can't give over instructions from one person to the next. He has to hear it directly from the husband. And we said that if Rabbi Yossi agrees to imru, so then you do have a problem because the sefer will sign, because he'll assume, because there is a possibility that he could be made by the shliach, and that's if the husband said imru. So again, we would have the problem that how could we allow the sefer to sign? Because he may be signing because they felt bad for him, and he was never appointed. So obviously then, Rabbi Yossi holds it even in case of imru, we established you cannot allow a sefer to sign, and therefore the sefer will always know that he cannot take instructions to sign from anyone except the husband, and that's why you don't have to worry if the husband said to allow the sefer to sign. He is allowed to sign.